Hi, everybody. Like Heather said, my name is Lindsay Walker, and I'm going to go to my second slide. It has a little bit of that intro information on it. I teach second grade math and science. We are departmentalized in the Baldwin-Whitehall School District. Prior to the school closure, I had never used Peardeck before, so I am far from an expert, but it has been something that I have begun to rely on for my lessons now that we are doing our distance learning. The why behind Peardeck came for me because we are a Google school. So when we started distance learning, we were pushing things out through Google Classroom. The problem became that at the elementary level, we are not one-to-one with devices. So our 6th through 12th grade are, but for kindergarten through 5th, students were using their own devices that they had at home. Some were using Chromebooks, some were using MacBooks or Kindles or desktops. They were okay with us pushing things out through Google Slides and Google Docs, but the issue became our students who were using phones from home, or a lot of our students had iPads. They were able to access Google Classroom with no problem, but the very first day we had this very basic lesson ready to go for our math class. You're going to see some of it on the next screen, but basically the first 2 weeks of our online instruction were reteach or review. So as a math team, we focused on some of our daily routines, almost like a calendar activity that you would do in the classroom, where we picked one number and asked students to answer different questions about it. They were used to doing this in the classroom on paper and pencil, so we gave them a Google Doc and said, okay, here you go, answer the same type of questions that you were used to. Obviously, we knew that they weren't going to be able to show us things like place value blocks or coins on their Google Doc, but we were still expecting with the first day that they would be able to open up their Google Doc, see the questions, and at least give us some type of answer. And then day one came, and what we found was that some of our students, depending on their device, they had no problem. They were able to access it. They were able to open up the Google Doc and the Google slide that we had for them, put their information in, and move on. We also had a lot of students who were trying to figure this out on their own because their parents were working. And again, it wasn't the content that was difficult for them, it was actually figuring out how to share their answer with us, how to give us their answer. We really focused on making sure that the content was student friendly, but what actually happened was the content was student friendly, but the students weren't able to share their answers with us depending on their device. So for day one, instead of teaching and responding to their answers, we spent time through Class Dojo and through the private comments on Google Classroom, through phone calls, trying to help the students and their parents be able to access our information and be able to share their answers with us. Day one was really all about troubleshooting and frustration on our part because we weren't able to necessarily help as much as we wanted to, since we didn't have access to all of the devices to see where the problems were coming in or seeing what the students' issues truly were on their device. It was not a content issue, it was they weren't able to figure out how to access things. So our first lesson for a math class looked like this. It was very simple. We had used Google Slides. We typed a little morning message for them. The only thing that we wanted them to do on this slide was in this share section here. We had been apart for about 2 weeks, so we wanted to know how they were doing. All they needed to do was go in and put an X to show us how they were feeling. And putting that one X on the screen turned into hours of troubleshooting and explaining how to access Google Slides. It was especially an issue for our students who were using the iPads or a phone, where even if they had the Google Slides app on their iPad, they still had so many steps to try to open it in Google Slides and put the X in and then try to figure out how to turn this into us. So we had the morning message, and then we also had a very basic Google Doc that asked them the same types of questions that we had used in the classroom. So they were really, a lot of them, all they had to do was type numbers. But again, depending on their device, opening that Google Doc for some of them on the iPad caused them so much frustration that what should have been a very quick, maybe 10-minute assignment was taking them an hour, and again, endless frustration on their part and on our part. So it only took one day for us to realize that something needed to change. So one of my colleagues had used Peardeck in the past, And he was actually the one who shared it and said, hey, maybe this would be the answer. Because with Peardeck, the students are able to access your Google Slides, but on any device. They don't need to have the Slides app. They don't need to have any special knowledge. They just need a device that will connect to the internet. So very quickly, we had to change our tune. The way our district was working distance learning, the students had math and science on the odd days of the month. So we had, unfortunately, we started on March 31st. So April 1st was their very next math class. So we had less than 24 hours to try to figure out how can we fix this for the parents and for the students, especially knowing that so many of the second graders were trying to do this on their own, but they had no idea how to use these apps. Some of them had used them in computer class before, but again, it would have been on a desktop, not on their own device. So instead of our initial Google Doc with questions in the slide, this was our first version of sharing math assignments and lessons with our students using Peardeck. So in Google Classroom, we attached this Google Doc, basically explaining to the students what to do. We recorded a video for the parents explaining how to access Peardeck. But really, when you get to the point of sharing it with your students, the only thing that you need to share with them is a link. So we explained it to them so that they knew how to get to the link. They had to click on the link, and then they would go back into the Google Doc and click, or into the Google Classroom and click Turn In, and then they should be good to go. Yes, it was different for them, so there was some adjustment there, but we shared a video that made it very easy. When you see how it's set up from the student point of view, you can see that it's very easily accessible for the students and for the parents. So there was not much of a learning curve there at all. So you saw initially that we had that one slide and then a Google Doc where students were trying to share information. That goal there with the today's number was also something that we were doing during our initial reteach and review. As we started to share new information, we needed to share more information with the parents and provide the students with instruction. We were able to do all of that through Google Slides and just include our videos. Anything that you have in a Google Slides presentation, there's a couple of steps to add the Peardeck extension, but then it turns into a much more student-friendly design. So the link that you are seeing here is the type of link that we would give to the students. So now on a math or science day, they click on their link and it takes them through. This was one example of a math lesson. So you're going to, start in the middle of my slides here. So they have a greeting. Again, this is very basic. You'll see it just looks like a slide that you might share on a projector in your classroom. There's nothing for the students to do on this screen. It's just something for them to look at, something for them to read. So you have the ability to just provide information to the students. But the nice part about Peardeck is all of the different ways that the students can interact with the slides and share their information for you. It has become so valuable because with math, we want to be able to see their work. In second grade, we were right at the point of, we had just started introducing 2-digit and 3-digit subtraction with regrouping. And now all of a sudden you're taking some of the most difficult concepts of the year and trying to teach it virtually to the students. Obviously, I still wanted to be able to see their work and see if they understood the concept, but there needed to be a format for the students to share their thinking, and that's exactly where Peardeck comes in. So on the second slide that the students see every day, it's that morning message greeting again. Same thing every day. Obviously, we switch up the morning message, but again, going back to that very first day, we wanted to know how they are doing, how they are feeling, since we're not with them. Again, that first day, filling in their feelings took them an extreme amount of time. Now, you'll see at the bottom of my screen, there are all different ways for the students to use either a pencil, a highlighter, a line tool, or the text all on the same screen. It's set to the pencil, so students could very easily pick their color, and all they have to do is, it's a little bit thick there, but their entire screen is interactive. They can write or draw or include a text box. Some of them like to put a text box with their X. It doesn't always line up perfectly, especially with second graders doing it on their own. You see my X is a little bit out of the screen, But in a matter of seconds, I was able to draw an X on the screen or use the text box to put the X there. Some of the other types of things that we can do, we mostly have the math slides set up with this same toolbar at the bottom. It is called the draw option on Peardeck, but it's a little bit misleading since you can either draw or use a text box on the slide. The students' directions are down at the bottom, so they can draw anywhere on there. They want to draw their place value blocks. So now, and this actually became an advantage for the students who were using the iPad because they have the touch screen. So it's very easy for them to draw hundreds flats and tens rods and ones cubes. For the students who are using a device with a mouse, then it was a little bit trickier for them to figure out, but they adapted very quickly. So obviously I won't go through every single slide that you can see here. We found that the drawing icon has been the most beneficial because depending on the type of device, if it's easier to use a touch screen for the students to draw, they can do that. Obviously they can still write. We really had to stress to make sure that the pencil was small if they wanted to write something on the screen, but inserting that text box is just a click away. So they can click, you do have to click on the text box each time, but the students picked up on that with no problem every time you want to put in a text box. There is another option that you can see on your screen now for a multiple choice question. Just like if you were doing a paper and pencil task and you wanted to see just a multiple choice. There's 3 answer choices by default, but you can change that. It's fully customizable. So it's another option where the students just click on the little button there, and then they can go on to their next slide. So again, these are just what their assignment would be. This is all part of what our daily warm-up would be, or something similar to a calendar for the younger grades too. This is all based on a Google Slides presentation that I had. All you needed to do was go in and to add the Peardeck extension onto there. So it's really nice to be able to use things that you already had existing. So this was actually one of the lessons from last week where we started teaching repeated addition with arrays, getting ready for multiplication. So I have a video here of myself explaining how to use an array. They just click on the video and watch it because again, it's just part of the Google Slides. It's not anything special for them to do. You can see at the bottom of the student screen, you don't see that Peardeck icon. So the students know that there's nothing for them to do on that screen except to watch the video. And then the students have, that's again one of mine, for then their math assignment, they had to add by rows and columns. So they have the fully interactive slide again. It was helpful in something like this, where the students who are still just learning that vocabulary of rows and columns, they were able to take their mouse and say, okay, oops, have it on text tool. Sorry, pencil. They were able to take their mouse and go across and say, okay, that's a row. I know there were 4 there. Here's another row, +4, +4, and then come down here and put in their text box and write their equation. So that was an example of where a student may want to use both the draw and the text box option on the same screen. So then that would go through and they have several more practice equations to do following the same format. Is that one? I mentioned at the beginning that I also teach science. We had 2 units left where we were talking about habitats and animals, and talking about animals' needs and life cycles and all the things that kind of all fit together there. So I have a couple of different examples of how we were able to use Peardeck to teach and to explain, but also the really nice part was not just the teaching aspect, but the students were really able to show what they had learned. And I do have some examples of student work that are coming up too, but I won't go through every single option here to show you every single slide. But again, some other things that Peardeck can do. On this lesson, the students have a copy of their textbook page that they can read, but then there's also a short video that's actually a song here for some of the students who might be struggling readers, or for some of our ELL students who wouldn't be able to read that on their own. And then you'll see that their Peardeck slide looks a little bit different here. There's not some place for them to write actually on the slide, But next to the slide, there is a text box. So it automatically brings up the cursor for them, and then the students can come over here and they were asked to tell the 4 needs of all animals. So it was very easy for them to type food, air, water, shelter. It's not a drawing option here. It was simply a text box, but this would be really helpful for the ELA teachers or social studies teachers where you're looking to see a little bit more writing, that you may not want the students to have that draw option because, you know, given that option, some of the students will definitely try to pick that pencil tool and write an entire paragraph for you using their finger on the iPad, and you may or may not be able to read it. So that is adding the text box option as another choice. Again, then there's some where the students just read and they don't interact. Here was one, and I know it's small, and I know it's really small for you to see with the screen shared, but there were 4 questions for the students to look at and to think about with their animal needs. They were picked any animal that they wanted, and they were going to tell us what they ate and what kind of shelter that they needed. So they were able to just add that little text box here. Again, it doesn't line up perfectly with the lines, but they were very, very easily able to say, okay, well, my animal's a dog, it eats dog food, and adding that text box in. Or it was able for students to be able to use the drawing tool. You'll see here that I encouraged the text box. So even though they had both options, you can still obviously provide the guidance depending on what you were looking at. There was a little quiz for the students to answer. It was a quiz that we would normally be giving paper and pencil if we were in class. So the questions are here. It asks them to circle, so they would just click, make sure that they have their pencil option, and then students were able to circle whatever their answer was, just like they would do in the classroom using paper and pencil. This one was one of our review wrap-up lessons for the science class. Students listened to a video, but then what I really wanted to know here, because we were not obviously assessing or grading their quizzes, I still wanted to know what they had learned. So that was where this came in, and it was really open-ended for the students. I have some of their examples there too. I liked it because my artistic students, or my students who loved to draw to share things, are able to do that and share their learning with me that way. But for the students who don't like to draw or struggled with drawing because of maybe the device that they were using, then they still had that text box option there to go through and answer some of the questions and share with me what it was that they had learned from our units. There's another one there where a video and the text were included, just like it would be with Google Slides. This one, you see on the right-hand side, the butterfly life cycle, that's actually a screenshot from their book. And it's a workbook where they would normally be interacting and drawing in the arrows here to show that they understand the butterfly life cycle. They were still able to do that for me because of the free form with the drawing tool. And then another one with the text. So there are really a lot of options. It's going to depend on what you're teaching and what you want them to show you and what type of information you're looking for from them. But if you are teaching, you know, a higher grade level or a grade level where you want to see more of a written response, you do still have that option. It does not all have to be drawing or a short little text box. So some of the things that I've learned and some of the complications that have come up with using Peardeck with the Google Slides. So it's extremely easy to add the Peardeck extension in with Google Slides. It's literally one click and you can add to each slide. If you're somebody who wants drawing on all of your slides, you can still duplicate your slides just like you normally would in Google Slides, and it would add that same drawing option or text box option or multiple choice option to all of your slides in Peardeck. Obviously, the biggest thing for me was that it was allowing all of my students to access my information and be able to complete their assignments without all of those steps required with using just Google Slides. It really, by the end of the first lesson, there were really no troubleshooting issues. It allowed the students to become a lot more independent. It gave the parents a lot less to do. They didn't need to play the tech department for their student because it was one click. They just needed access to that website. As I showed in the science, I also really liked it because it gave the students choice on how to share some of their learning, especially in the science where I really just wanted to know, did they understand what I was trying to teach? Did they understand that lesson? So go ahead and draw it for me, go ahead and write it for me. A lot of things like we would do in the classroom, but that can be limited depending on what application you're sharing using the online distance learning. I already touched on that for math, but again, a huge plus for me with math was that I'm able to see the students' work. You'll see in some of the examples that we were using a number line, and it was very easy for the students because they're able to use that drawing tool. Down at the bottom there was just the example of some student work that I had shared from that last lesson in science, where some students wanted to draw a very detailed picture and add their text box. Other students wanted to write one sentence. They both shared something that they learned. I can see from both of them that they understood the concept, but they had a little bit of that voice and choice that we always want to see in the classroom. So I did include some options or some pictures here of the students' work. This was one of those number lines that I had talked about. So when the student went to solve their subtraction problem, they were able to draw their number line and show all of their steps and all of their partial answers so I could see exactly how they got their answer. That's something that I wouldn't have been able to do when we were just using Google Slides or Google Docs for the students. Another example of when the students were solving problems with regrouping, they were able to show me their tens rods and what that regrouping actually looked like, so I could really see that they understood why this 7 became a 6 and why this 1 became an 11. So again, it was very helpful for me, since I'm not there watching the students work. I can at least still see, yes, they understand the concept, yes, they have this process down. It's not just coming up with an answer. Again, some of them you can see like to use the text box option there for a smaller part and then use the drawing for a bigger part. They have that choice for all of their assignments. Going back to teaching repeated addition and arrays, where I want to see the students draw an array with 3 columns with 5 in each. Very easy for them to do using the Peardeck draw option. And then again, a lot of them do use the combination of drawing and using the text box there for the equation. Some of the more creative and artistic students, the amount of detail that they are able to add to their drawings is beyond impressive. Again, this is 2nd grade, so they're 7 and 8 years old, and they are drawing these very detailed pictures. Obviously, this is a caterpillar life cycle. So we can see that she understood that it starts out as an egg, then a caterpillar, then the chrysalis, and the butterfly. So I can definitely look at that very quickly and say, yes, she understood that concept. Again, another one sharing what they learned about pollination. And for the ones who just like the text, then here's an example of what he learned about plants and what plant needs are. Again, it looks very different, but I can very easily see that he understood that lesson. So that was all the good things. There were some drawbacks or some complications or some things to keep in mind as you move forward. So one of them, I am somebody who likes to plan ahead and get ahead and post all of my lessons to Google Classroom as far in advance as possible when I have them planned. But then I remembered that Peardecks, once you share them on your Peardeck, through your Peardeck account on the website, they only remain active for 30 days and then they're archived. You can get them out of being archived, but that link is not going to work for your students. So the things that I've created now, I can use again in the future, but it creates a different link for the students. So I had to go back and stop posting too far in advance on Google Classroom, since the students would not be able to access it when it actually became an assignment for that day. Because we are departmentalized, we have a team of 4 teachers that all teach math in my building. And so we like to work together and share our Google Slides. We have a team drive that we share in our Google accounts. And you can keep things in a team drive, but when you go to upload them to the Peardeck website, you have to make sure that a Peardeck is, or the slide presentation, I'm sorry, that you are using is shared in your Google Drive. If it is in a team drive or any shared drive through your Google account, the Peardeck does not recognize it. The website does not recognize it. So it's just one extra step to keep in mind. It's really no big deal, but it was something that we ran into early on when we were trying to use it. And that kind of ties in with the typos too. If you have a typo or a mistake or something you want to change in your slides presentation, you would also, in order to change that on Peardeck, you would have to go into slides and update the slide and then share a new Peardeck link with your students. Peardeck links to your Google Drive, so it's very easy from the Peardeck website to share your files. It automatically has the most recent files listed there for you. So if you're working on something and then go to share through Peardeck, it's right there and easy to access. But when there's a typo, that is a couple of steps. I know there were a couple of times where I forgot to put the draw option on that first morning message slide where I wanted to see how students were feeling. Well, by the time a student realized that there was a mistake there, in order for me to change that for the rest of the students, I would have needed to go back into slides, fix my mistake, shared a new Peardeck file, and then shared a new link with all of the students. So you want to make sure that you definitely proofread better than you would if it was just something you were putting up on your screen and you would be able to easily share it. So the typos do create a little bit of a problem. And then I put checking student work on here. It's definitely not necessarily a con or a drawback, but for me, it was something that I had to get used to. So you're going to see on my screen here, this is what one math problem would look like for these 7 students. So each one of these blue screens represents a different student's work. And the way the teacher dashboard or the teacher view works is you don't necessarily pull it up and see all of Johnny's work for the day. When you're going to pull it up on your end, you are going to see all of the students who have completed each individual slide. So let's say that this was math problem number 1 for the day. I can pull it up and I can see the work for 7 students. It is a little bit blurry here for my screenshot. It's not obviously on the real website. This is a grid view where I can see multiple students' work at one time. So that's great, but for providing feedback, what I've had to do is I just have a list of all of my students, and as I'm checking this here, and if I see, okay, student A, you made a mistake here, then I just jot it down on paper. But it does take some getting used to seeing all of the students' work on the screen at the same time, rather than just all of Johnny's work, all of Susie's work. Where this red is would be the student's name, so you can see who the work belongs to. That's just blocked out there. But in some ways, depending on what the assignment is, it's actually nice because it can be easier. Once you get into the habit of looking at one question at a time, it can be a little bit easier to check because I know that all of these students, they should have the 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 equation for the first row. And then for the second row, I should see 6 plus 6 for all of them. This one, I have zoomed in a little bit, so I can very easily check all 6 at the same time and say, okay, they all mastered this. So once you get into the habit of seeing one question at a time, it actually can be a little bit of a time saver for you too. All right, as far as some of my practical tips go, it's very easy to use the slides that you already have. You need to add the Peardeck extension and have a Peardeck account on the website, but only adding the Peardeck, those little prompts at the bottom, it really only takes seconds. That's what you're seeing here where it says ask students a question. These are the different types of answers that you can add for the students. So the text box was that one where you saw it off to the right-hand side where students would be typing a paragraph or giving you more of a text-based answer. Then multiple choice. Number is a lot like a text box on the side, but it will only allow students to type in a numerical answer. The website one is not, is not one that I have used. The drawing one is really the one that I use the most often because it's very universal. They can do so much with it. The draggable option here is if you wanted students to sort something, but depending on the device, it can be a little bit finicky and it's not as user-friendly as some of the other ones. So it's not one that I have used with the students. You can still create a whole slide presentation and add in all of the Peardeck options and then share that slide presentation with your coworkers. The biggest thing is just remembering that if it's in a team or a shared drive, that everybody has to make their own individual copy first. But just sharing it, if it's in your drive and shared, it will maintain all of the Peardeck options that you've included so your coworkers can use it too. As far as trying the different formats, like I said, and like you saw, Draw was definitely my favorite because they were able to do so much with it. And then down in the pink, this would be my biggest set of advice. In your settings option on the website, there is an option that for most people, it appeared to be default to require student logins here. Again, we use Google Classroom. So in order for the students to get to my Peardeck slide, they're already logged into their Google account. So I can see their name. But I did have some coworkers who that setting was not on by default for them. And they shared their Peardeck with their slides for the students for their first lesson. And when they went to check their answer, instead of seeing the student names, by default, it turned into little animal avatars and names. So the teacher knew that the saber-toothed tiger student did a really great job on their assignment, but there was no way, once it was already submitted, to go back and try to match up the students. So requiring that student login is key if you want to be able to match up the work with the students. And as far as my next steps go, there are thousands of resources on the Peardeck website. I've had a chance to look at some of them, but really this was kind of survival mode this year and making sure that I was able to get things out to my students and parents that they were going to be able to do. There is a live option that, from what I've seen so far, looks a lot like Kahoot, where you would be able to put the question up on the screen if you were together in the classroom, and then have students on their device share their answer, and you'd be able to see the answers on the screen. Obviously, I have not been able to test that since we're not together. There is an immersive reader that is a new feature for the Peardeck, where if you turn that on, it will read your slides to the students. Now, you saw in some of mine where I had screenshots of the textbook. It's not going to read that to them because it recognizes that as a graphic, but anything you type, so if you have struggling readers or ELL students who might not be able to read the content, there is an option for that. There are some timer options and some options more for using it live in the classroom where you can lock the screen and limit the students so that they don't have as much time as they would like, so they can't come back. There are also lots of templates and vocabulary and flashcard activities that are already listed on the website, but again, I have not had a chance to try it, but this is definitely something that I want to continue even once we are back in the classroom, because it has been so beneficial in what I've been able to do just really in the last month or so. So it's very easy to learn. All right, Heather.
You have a ton of questions. I have written them down. Yeah. So for everybody who is in the session, if you want to stay around for the Q&A, we understand that you know your time is valuable, but we do not have another session that is coming up after this one. So if we go over our time, we're okay with that, as long as, Lindsay, you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But if you have to go, you certainly can go and access the recording later for the answers, the Q&A. So I've been writing them down as they've been coming in. So I'm just going to go through them in the order that they came. Some of them you addressed and you touched on, but we'll just go through there. So first of all, you know, one of the questions that often comes up is it free? And we know that there's a free version and a paid version, just like with every tech tool. And Peardeck is free through the end of the school year, just like most of the tech tools. No. Are you using features in Peardeck that would typically be in the paid version? Do you know?
And the majority of mine have all been from the free version. The immersive reader was one that might be in the paid version, but as far as I can tell, pretty much everything that I shared was available in the free version.
That's nice. That's great. So somebody asked early on, when you were using the pen, can you set it up to have the pen come up? I'm assuming that means, can you set it up to have the pen come up automatically as their sort of default?
No, it would give, let me see if this is one of the ones that I can see. No, so with that draw option, they have the pencil, the highlighter, or the text box option on the slide. And as far as I know, there is not a way to make it only be the pencil.
And while you're on that page, there were lots of questions about how do you insert the textbook pages into your slides?
I just use the screenshot option from my Chromebook. So on the Chromebook, it's the Control Shift and then that little key above the number 6 when I am looking at the online version of my textbook.
Okay, so you took a snip of it. And anybody who's a
Yes.
Windows user, you have this snipping tool
Yep.
automatically available to you. So yeah, there are lots of different options for how to take that. So you didn't do anything fancy to
Nope.
insert the textbook pages. You just
snipped it and pasted it.
Perfect. And so I feel like you addressed the feedback near the end where you showed how there were lots of questions about how do you give feedback. If anybody still has further questions after what Lindsay showed us in those couple of slides where she showed the 7 kids who would turn in work, so you see the assignment one at a time.
Yeah, so I mean, I can answer it generally too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in Peardeck, there is not an option for you to give feedback. You can view all of their work, but you cannot access or annotate anything on Peardeck. So all of my feedback then, when the students complete all of this, they go back to where the link was in Google Classroom, they turn it in, and then I would just provide the feedback to them in Google Classroom on the assignment.
I'm going to jump ahead to a related question that came later, but and if you can't answer this, then I understand, but there's somebody who says, we're not using Google Classroom, we are using a different LMS. Do you know Peardeck well enough to see how they would see student work in other LMSs? This one in particular asked about Schoology, or is that something you have to research?
So I don't know, but all of the student work that I am seeing in those screenshots of the student work, that is just from the Peardeck website. I log in to the Peardeck website and then I click on the session that I had shared with the students and I see it there. So it doesn't matter what platform you're using, you could still share the link to your Peardeck. It would pull up like this student information here, and then whenever they were done, you would just log into the Peardeck website and you would still be able to see it.
Terrific. So Jenna, hopefully that answered your question, that it's going to look the same might not integrate quite as beautifully in Schoology, but hopefully that'll help for you.
Yeah, you'll be able to see it.
Can you go back to your math problem, where you had the multiple choice slide? Somebody really liked the fonts that you used for the numbers. They wanted to know where you found them.
Let me see. It was one of my links. I think it was. No, it's not that one. All of the fonts, though, all of the information that I have made, all the presentations, they were all done through Google Slides. So it would be a Google font. I'm trying to see.
I'm sorry, because that was one of my questions.
Oh, good.
Hard time finding interesting fonts, but is that, I mean, is it just another font that you downloaded?
Yeah, it would have just been one of the ones. So let me see if I can.
It would have been in your slides, not something in here.
Yeah, it would have just been through Google Slides. So I don't know if you can see it on here, just with the more font option.
Okay.
It would have been
animals, like they were.
Yeah, they were the little cartoony numbers that you had.
Right.
That might not have been a font.
That was not font. That was just a clip art image that I just did a Google image search.
So you just did a clip art for each of those numbers and like each of them is a picture.
Yes.
All right, I've done that one. I was hoping maybe there was something simpler than that, but thanks.
Sorry,
yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good question. I feel like you addressed this one and we had a little conversation around in the chat, but if you can just be pretty explicit, when you have the option for the kids to draw or a multiple choice question, is there a way to do 2 options where they can do either one?
As far as I know, you can only add one of those extensions per slide, which is kind of why I stick to that draw extension, because it allows the pen option or the text option.
Okay. Do you know if there is a way to insert audio?
There is, and it is a new feature because it was very interesting because the videos that we linked early on worked, but audio was not working for some of my colleagues. But it is something that Peardeck just added recently in the last couple of weeks. So yes, audio works too.
Okay, so the question really was, sort of, for example, could you add a clip of yourself reading aloud to the students?
Yes.
Now, obviously, if you did that in a screencasting software, if you recorded yourself, you can upload that video and add that audio. That could be one of those premium version or premium options that in the fall you're going to have to pay for.
It could be.
Keep that in mind, everybody. We're talking about that at the AIU level, how that's going to be a concern. We're using all
So
these
many things
now, and what's going to happen when we have to pay for them. So we're talking about it. We're talking about it with your leaders, hopefully. Does Peardeck include presentation templates, or are the templates you're using straight? I see that the one that you've used with us is a Google slide because I've used that myself, but
Yes.
does Peardeck have its own templates as well?
No. Well, not that I have seen. There are Pear decks that are already set up. So I guess then the answer would be yes. But I don't know that they are templates like we're used to with using Google. I think they may just be already pre-formatted with questions and answers that teachers would want to use. Kind of like Kahoot. If you're looking for questions on a certain topic, you can search that and use them, but I don't know if they are customizable or not from the website.
So if you want specific templates, or to specific
just do it
backgrounds and colors and fonts, you'd have to move it over
Yes.
Google Slides or PowerPoint, either way. Yeah. So one of the questions related to feedback was, can teachers make comments to students on each slide like Google Slide? And you had already said, no, that's not possible. Nope. Talked about, there's another feedback question moving up to, can you upload PDF files for the students to interact with and write on?
You would have to do it through your Google Slides or your PowerPoint, but you can definitely put a PDF in the Google Slides and then use it. It is something that we have done. I had a Teachers Pay Teachers math mystery, and yes, you can do it. It's just that you can't directly take the PDF and put it into Peardeck. You would have to put it into Google Slides first.
Okay. Now, if you do have Adobe Acrobat, you can convert any PDF to an image file, and then you can upload that image really easily. So, but not everybody has that. Most people just have, the free Adobe Reader. But if you do have Adobe Acrobat, that's one thing you can do. Another question about linking the textbook pages. Can you show how to go from Google Slides to Peardeck?
Yes. Okay, so this is my Google Slides presentation that I have to share with you here. So under add-ons, the very first thing that you have to do is make sure that you have the Peardeck add-on. If not, you can just go to Get Add-ons and it's right there. And then it takes a second to load. So even in Google Slides, I guess there are template libraries that are pre-made that I just have not had a chance. But again, I think they are more specific type of lessons that you would use. Okay, so this was one of my random slides. If I wanted this to have that draw option on it, as soon as it loads, I click draw, and then you'll see that it's adding it. And down at the bottom of the screen, then that little Peardeck icon came up with the directions for the students. So now this is a slide that students can draw on. And then again, this really takes a lot of playing around with. It sounds a lot more complicated when I share it than it actually is. So let's say that I had done all of the draw options on all of my slides or added multiple choice questions or whatever I wanted. And then I need to log in to the Peardeck website. And again, there's lots of things there, but down about in the middle of the page, this is where I was saying it knows all of your recent files. So here's the one from the training. All you have to do is click on it. Again, I mentioned this, but the live session would be if you were in class. You don't want to pick this for your students because if you do now, they need you to go through and advance each slide for them. They wouldn't be able to access it on their own. So the student paste option is the one that you would want. It will open a screen there for you, and then there's just the option right here to copy the link or to share it directly to Google Classroom. I like to copy and paste the link because then I can put it in as an assignment and assign a point value to it and assign the due date. But once you have that link, you would share the link with the students. And then, I don't remember which one okay, so then there is the one where I added the Peardeck extension to it. So now my students can write or draw on that slide. So it's a few step process, but once you do it once and you see how to do it, it does not take very long. It is pretty teacher friendly after the first time.
Definitely. All right. So that actually answers the next question, which is how do you create a Pear Deck? Is it just like creating a slideshow? So similar, not exactly, but it's nice
Yes.
to see that demo. It's really nice to see that demo. So thank you.
Sure.
So sort of related to that where you just showed where we could start it in teacher mode or not the student pays mode, but the other mode.
The live mode.
Yeah, the live mode. Do students submit when finished, or can you see it as they are doing it in real time? So
you can see it as they are doing it in real time. There is also an option where, I'm not going to pull mine up because it does have all the students' first and last names, but up at the top of your screen, it will also tell you how many of your students are active at that time. So you can click on that. And again, because mine are all linked to their Google accounts, so there's no question about who's on right now and who is not. It's also nice because their work stays. So if a student does a couple of problems now and exits out because they're done, they can click on that Peardeck link again and it picks up right where they left off. They don't need to restart. They don't need to save. As long as they click on their link logged in as themselves. Now I have had that be an issue where maybe a student was accidentally logged in as their parents' Google account and they started and then they realized, no, wait, I'm under the wrong account. And then obviously they couldn't see it when they went back in as themselves. But yes, you can see their work in real time.
Nice, very nice. So I don't know if that question was for synchronous learning, but if it was, you have the option to show it synchronously if it's a synchronous question. So whoever's question that was. Good, thank you. Just a couple more. Someone asked, it seems like you were able to pick it up relatively easily. Would you call it easy to learn?
Yes. Especially because if you were somebody who was already using slides or PowerPoint and you already have the content there, you saw how easy it was to add those Peardeck options to the slides. It literally takes seconds. And if you don't already have the slides created, but like for my math, where I want to have that draw option on all of the slides, all I need to do is duplicate this slide and the draw option with the Peardeck is already there. So I don't even have to keep going back and clicking on that, which was really nice too. Really the only thing was just remembering how to go to the website and where to find my existing Google Slides Peardeck option and then how to share it with the students. But yes, it was very easy to learn.
Nice. So actually a more recent question specifically related to that. I think I missed how you put in the drawing tools, and Paula, that was another one of your questions. So,
yeah. You said it's an extension.
Yes.
If you go right after I asked the question, I think you answered it.
Okay. Yep, add-ons, and then Peardeck for Google Slides add-on is right there. And when you click on open, it brings up this little sidebar here on the right. Or it's going to open it again since I clicked. But then these 6 circles here are your choices.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, and then there's just one more question that I wrote down, and then I'll go through and see if there's anything else that's been more recent in the chat. Someone was trying to create or make that connection between Peardeck and Google Classrooms or Google Classroom, and said, Peardeck is asking permission to see my students' emails and rosters. I feel like I should say no to that. So do you have to? Do you know?
I don't know. Well, I'm going to guess that yes, that's probably how it knows that the students have logged in. But honestly, I don't remember that option.
Yeah, and I'll play with it. I was kind of playing while you were talking. I was trying to be in it. And so hopefully it'll be, I'll work around it, and I'll just check with my administrators. But it was weird that I felt like it was asking me to share information about them. So, but if it's if it's an extension and it's something I can be doing and it interacts with it, I think it's okay. There was an article I could have read, but I was trying to listen to you at the same time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that might be something you need to look into. It's probably, that's probably exactly right. Google has to have access to certain things in order to.
Right.
And if you're really concerned, it might be a question for your tech director.
Okay, or I'll go to my principal before I use it, because it looks simple, and I need simple. So, but
Yeah.
it looks simple.
I was trying to look to see about the logins, if it might have been under there. There's like the option for the Google login or Microsoft, depending on what software you use.
Okay, well, maybe that's how they know that's their Google login. I think
that's what I'm wondering.
Well, maybe my class rosters and stuff it was asking for, but maybe because I linked them to a class period.
Possibly.
Yeah, something else I had that I was trying to use. The flip grid this morning asked me for who I wanted to attach it to. So it needed them, but it never asked for it. I just Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to keep everybody's time, but I'll figure it out. But there was something I just didn't know if you already knew that. So.
No, I do not.
No, thank you though. This was great. I get so excited over all these and I want to use all of them right now.
So this has been so great this week. So now I'm going into the chat for any questions that I didn't write down while you were talking. So there are a couple here. Dana, I don't know if Dana's still here, but her question is, so all students will need to add the Peardeck extension on their devices before you can share the Peardeck slides, correct?
No, they do not need to add anything. When you give them this link, it is just like providing any other website. They do not need the extension or an app or anything. They just need the link that you share with them from the website.
As long as they've gone through their account. Like
well, they can access it anywhere. I mean, they can access it anywhere. When I was setting up my first ones, I was just sending it to my husband. He had a Google account, so it was just showing me his name. Because I required that login. You don't have to require the login. And I'm pretty sure in the settings, that's why I was trying to look at the help option, that there is an option where you can just have the students type in their name. But again, since my students are accessing it through Google Classroom, I haven't tried that. But I think there is an option where it would not show up as the random animals, but they could type in their name.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so the extension is for the teacher to be able
Yes.
to make that connection to connect your existing Google Slides to Peardeck. Someone wants to know, are there any other extensions you've downloaded besides Peardeck?
I have not. That is what I have stuck to because it was easy and it worked. And that was as far as I went.
Okay. There's some chatter in the chat related to some of the questions we were asking in the discussion at the time, so I'm just going past those. Will the kids need to download anything extra to use this? Paula, there you go. There's I feel like we just,
Try not to.
Yep, no, that's fine. How do you get the free teacher version? Every time I get to the teacher dashboard, they told me I had to get the premium. It's possible that premium is the only one that's available right now.
Right now, that's what I'm thinking, because they made the premium available to everybody. And it shows on mine that I have the 45 days left.
Okay. So you probably have to sign up for premium, and then at the end of 60 days or at the end of the school year, they'll send you an email that says, hey, it's time to pay for this.
Right, but they did not, they definitely did not take any credit card information, so it's not something like it will automatically bill you.
Most of the ed tech companies are not doing that, so.
No.
When you had the prompt and directions along the bottom of the screen, was that done in Google Slides or was that done within Peardeck?
I don't know if the person's still here, but I'm guessing that that is related to what you see on the bottom here, where it added that little Peardeck icon. That's how you know that it is a Peardeck slide, that it is going to be interactive. And it reminds you too that you cannot remove that because it removes the interactive capability too.
Awesome.
Can I just add to that? Yeah. On some, this is Michelle. On some of the slides, for the math slides, you had like a prompt giving the kids telling them what they would do. So did you edit what the Peardeck slide says, or did you just originally have that on your Google slide?
Let me pull up, was it on, let me see if it was on this one, if I can answer that. Was it on something here?
Maybe it was even the slide before that. It was something different that didn't just say students draw anywhere on the slide. I thought it was, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just.
There were some, like this one where I put the draw on there. Those were my directions for Google Slides. There was some too in the science where it asked them to use this, this was a reminder here to use the type option instead of using it. So anything that was up at the top of the screen would have been what I did in Google Slides. The only Peardeck directions would be down here in the gray box.
Okay, so that just automatically is what's pre-filled depending on what option you choose.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Welcome.
Michelle. Question, not sure if you'll know the answer to this, but can this get put into Spanish? In your explorations of Peardeck, do you know if there are multilingual options?
I do not know. I do not have any Spanish speaking students, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I don't know that either, but probably relatively easy to find out. Nicole, if you're still here. Oh, someone says they believe there is a translation tool. So hopefully there's something there. All right, I believe then that does it for our questions. So we'll just give it another minute if anybody has questions for those 50 some of us who are still in the session. If you want to type them into the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask those questions, you guys are welcome to do that. Lots of really good feedback in the chat.
I'm sorry, I always have another question, so I'll try to shut up in between. But so you just took this whole thing, this was a Google slide presentation that then you put it into the Peardeck and then addressed each slide as you wanted to add an extension to or add something to.
You have to add the extensions in Google Slides first before it goes to the website. But yes.
And then it ends up in this website.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's where when you could see when I log. So this is still logged in as me, but it accesses my Google Drive. So the most recent files are here, or you can open up your drive.
Right, you said about it stores them after 30 days. Okay, thanks.